Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Hello, my name is Chuck, nickname Van, of Vancouver, Washington, USA. Welcome to Talk Shoe call number 120297. This call is being recorded, and anything said will go into the public domain. Thus, everyone is entitled and encouraged to copy and republish any or all of this MP3 file, and you do not need to permission, no notification, or attribution is necessary. To find more of these public domain audios, go to the top right corner of any TalkShoe.com call screen and search for Vancouver or 120297, the show number, or click on the purple top left Live Now button to see if the show is presently underway. The time out here in the west coast of the U.S. is about 8 minutes until 10 p.m. And today is Tuesday, September 4, 2012. I have on the phone with me from the last call where she ran out of minutes on her prepaid cell call phone, Sydney, and how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Hanging in there, thank you. Now, I've been doing a lot of talking in the chat room, and there are, I don't know how many people are there, about 10 or 15 people in here. What have you learned that what rocks your boat that you've heard?
I'm concerned that nobody's really networking enough. And I don't know how you accomplish that when you're afraid. I don't know how you get to that. But it seems like if things are really going to change, that's one of the things that needs to happen is people need to be able to stick together. And I don't know how you do that other than what is happening with this.
Now, I hate to be defeatist, but I do want to respond to that you've heard me say that 2/3 to 9/10 of the people that are in this chat room right now, I believe, are perps. What do you think about that? What percent would you give it? What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think you're probably right because I feel that everywhere I go, the odds are the same. That half of the people that I'm around are maybe 50% of them are perps.
Okay, but so there are a lot of perps, and so you're not delusional. You're not making this up. You just think their perps are effing with you where you go, and that's now I haven't had it in a while, but there were times when it was the case with me. Anyway, tell me about the isolation that you've encountered. That's one thing that we talked about earlier, and I'm asking you to repeat that, but this time on the recording.
Well, I haven't actually been able to talk to anybody for a couple of years because there are only 3 people that are close to me, and of those 3 people, I live with one, and the other 2 are so tired of hearing about it that whenever I bring it up, they want to get off the phone. And my family's deserted me. All my friends deserted me. Everybody completely deserted me. So I've been in isolation. We stayed home for 8 months in our house in order to keep people from going in there and messing with our things. We kept one of us in the house at all times. And
well, at least you have somebody else. At least you have somebody else to be in the house with that you can share that responsibility. I envy you for that.
Yeah, and that's the thing that has saved. Really is being able to be close to one person.
Okay. And
over the 20 years that this has been happening, I slowly withdrew. I mean, I was kind of a shy person anyway, but I was just starting to find my way, and so I just withdrew into this shell and got to be the kind of person that didn't really associate with anybody because I knew that I couldn't trust any of those relationships. So it stole my life from me, basically.
Okay, but what happened? What event was it that happened? You mentioned 2 years ago where you found out that there was this protocol. What happened, please?
I started noticing that somebody was breaking into my car about 5 years ago, and I thought it was the original group from 20 years ago. And I still don't know for sure if it was the same group at that time. But I know now they're related, but I don't know if they were related 5 years ago. And I just noticed that somebody had been breaking in my car. I believe what they were doing was putting recording devices in my car. And, you know, the carpet had been pulled out of its metal trim, so you know somebody was in there because I hadn't touched it. And nobody else gets in my car but me and one other person, and she's not capable of doing that.
But you said something about 2 years ago. You had mentioned 2 years ago that at what point did you become aware of the term organized stalking or gang stalking, please?
I didn't even find out about that until I had left the situation. I became aware because people started treating me differently in all of the stores in this small town. And things were happening on my computer that I didn't do. I knew
like what types of things happened on your computer that you didn't do, please?
Things would disappear, and then people would talk to me about things I had been looking up on the computer that I didn't mention to anybody.
Oh, like you were Googling, you mean, or what?
Yeah, I was Googling things, and then people would mention them. And people would make comments like they had been part of my conversation on my phone, which was absurd because, you know, I know who I talk to. I don't talk to that many people, and I never have. So I knew what I said to which people. I know that one of my brothers was tracking me. He's the one who paid for the phone. He's the one who bought the computer. I noticed my house had been broken into because the door jamb was split. Somebody had split it trying to get in. I talked to a cop about it, and he would not file a report for me. He said not to file a report, to collect evidence first.
But at one point, you made the comment. At what point, I'm trying to drive in on it, did you realize recognize the term gang stalking, organized stalking? At what point did you come up to a term, and how did you come across that?
Last May, when I got set up again with the computer, I started Googling stalking, and I was Googling bullying and ostracizing, and I found the terms organized stalking, gang stalking.
So it was May 2011. That's when you really wised up. Am I putting words in your mouth by saying that you wised up about it?
No, that's exactly what happened. I thought they just hated me and wanted me to leave town. I didn't realize it was some sort of program, you know, some sort of agenda-based thing besides just trying to kick me out of town.
Now, did your targeting increase after that happened, or did it about stay the same? Did it decrease? What do you have to say?
Which time are you talking about? At what time?
May of 2011, when you finally wised up to it.
No, what's happened since then is doctors have blacklisted us. I've seen people here and there. Things have gotten to be less, like they're not as careful about it, but there are fewer of them. But they're still there. You know, there's no question that they're still there, and they still want you to know that they're there.
So they're there, and they want you to know they're there. These people that are screwing with you. Is that what you're saying, please?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, how do you know?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
It wouldn't be effective if you didn't know about it. You know.
But you didn't know about it 18 years ago, or 15 or 12 years ago, and it was. How is it different now than it was then, please?
I think it evolved into something else. You know, I mentioned it to an associate of mine who said, yes, I believe you, and as we talked about it, she said it's just something that got out of control.
And when was this? When was this that you mentioned to that associate?
20 years ago. And that told me that she knew about it and that she knew what was happening, and our relationship pretty much ended right then.
Now, you mentioned that at one point, and I'm sorry to bring this up, and let me know if you want me to change subjects or what have you, but you mentioned at one point in our conversation that you saw a therapist and that you felt that your stalking may have increased at that time. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, I was just trying to find somebody to talk to. I was depressed, and I was in a bad marriage, and, you know, I was irritable with my kids, and I didn't want to be that way. And so I called a hotline, and this woman said, I didn't have any money. I told her I didn't have any money. She said, well, I can find somebody for you. Have you ever heard of this organization? And I said, no, I've never heard of it. And from that time on, I started having somebody following me. But it was just, actually, the therapist was seen 3 times following me. And, you know, odd things would happen. I would just see people watching me, and when I would look at them, they would turn away real quickly. And it really felt like it was pointed right at me. People knew things they shouldn't know about my life, things I hadn't discussed with them.
And they made a conversational comment about it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like they forgot that they weren't supposed to know, and they would bring things up to me that they weren't supposed to know. So they kind of forgot that they were talking to me about it, and they weren't supposed to know. And it was just too bizarre, you know, but how... Okay. Go ahead.
So, but you think it was because it may have started because you contacted a hotline.
Right. And there was an organization in place that had an agenda, and they thought that I fit into that agenda, and I believe it was either research-based through a university or research-based through something else. And I don't know what that something else would be. But your therapist actually that the hotline turned you on to was actually doing the following. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, that is what I'm saying. And she wasn't the only one, but I did see her. She came out to my house, not actually to my house, but a couple of miles from my house, 20 miles away from where she lived. She came into my place of work with a wig on.
Really?
And at the end of all of this, she was in the car that she had bought about 15 years ago and was right in line with the stalkers following me around.
Tell me about, now I'm just bringing some ideas off of my list because I made some notes before. Tell me about, you found some porn on your PC and they framed you for it. What do you have to say about that, please?
Oh, that wasn't me, but that was somebody else that said that.
Oh, okay. Said they found it. All right. So a couple of years ago is when you finally put your finger on it about organized stalking. Is that right? And how have things changed? How's your life changed since then, please?
Oh, my life is completely changed. I don't have the freedom to be who I want to be. I haven't had that freedom for 20 years, but it's gotten a lot worse. You know, I used to have hope about being able to pursue my dreams and not be blacklisted everywhere I go. Now I don't believe that's ever going to happen. I don't work out of the house anymore. I don't go out and enjoy myself much. I pretty much stay in the house most of the time. And I may or may not change that in my life. It depends on how things go. I was totally afraid. A year and a half ago, I was really afraid. I'm not like that now. And I don't expect to ever feel like that again unless I'm physically threatened.
Okay,
but
now
I want the word out.
You want the word about why don't you fill in the blank?
I want the word out about gang stalking. I want people to get together and try to do something about it.
Okay, now how do you see people getting together, given that we kind of, I think, agree that in this room right now there are like 20 people, and we think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what percent of them do you think are perping or here to screw with us?
Well, you know, I'm not looking at the phone numbers, but just based on the people that you had muted earlier, I'm thinking it's probably 50% might be perp.
Okay.
I don't know these people, though. I'm new to this, so, you know, you've probably dealt with some of these people before.
So you've only been around, I don't recognize most of the names either, and I can't see the phone numbers. All I can see is guest number 3, 4, 16, 17, 8, and so forth. But you think your doctor had you blacklisted.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us more about that, please?
Yeah, every time I've been to a doctor, whether it was for me or somebody else in my family in the last 2 years, and even a little bit before that, it's there's always something wrong. You know that they are treating you in a way that is different by comparing how they treat other people.
Sure.
They treat you with disrespect. They give you looks that don't make sense. I went into a federal office for somebody to help somebody get something, and they glared at me. They started yelling at me. They accused me of something.
So you're saying in a federal office they actually were outright nasty, perping?
To the point where I went to get a lawyer.
Really?
To take care of the business. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about that lawyer, if you would, please. And how many lawyers have you talked to regarding this issue?
Well, I only have talked to that one. I tried to talk to another one, and he immediately started treating me like I was a beast of some kind, and would not listen to my story. Basically sat there and told me he didn't believe anything I was saying. And that lasted about 20 minutes, and then he asked me to leave. And I was very calm, very rational. I gave him the facts. I said, this is what's happened, and he was prepared for me. I could tell that.
When you say he was prepared for you, how, in what way, please?
I believe that he had been contacted and told something. I don't know what he was told. Nobody's ever told me what it is. One of my brothers did say over the phone before he quit me, he said, it sounds like something you guys did it sounds like it's because of something you guys did a long time ago. My neighbor.
Okay. Now that.
Go ahead.
Oh, please, you go ahead. You were going to talk about your neighbor.
Before I moved, there was one neighbor who, when I was walking my dog out next to the fence, she bent over and pretended to be picking weeds. And she said to me, if you guys need any help for anything, let me know. But she pretended to be picking weeds, and that's not what she was doing. She was just trying to look like she wasn't talking to me.
So she was trying to help you. She was helpful.
She was, but I couldn't get her involved because I didn't want what was happening to me to happen to her. And so I didn't get her involved. There was no way we could win against the whole town. And there was no point in getting her involved.
Okay. Now the lawyer that you talked about was sounds like the first lawyer. What about the second lawyer regarding this service that you got, harassment in a federal office? Tell me about that lawyer, could you please?
That lawyer was through legal aid and was available for people who are disabled. And when I went in to help somebody get services, the clerk started telling my business to the whole room. I mean, he was yelling at me. He was yelling out all my business. He asked me a question. I tried to explain why I had done something. He started shaking his head and glaring at me, and obviously didn't believe me. And I just said, I think I'm just going to handle this by getting an attorney. I didn't get mad or anything. I just said I'm going to handle this with an attorney, and I left. And the other time I had been in there, the person who was helping me said, this isn't yours. Like I was trying to get benefits for myself, and it absolutely was not for myself. It was for somebody I love, and I don't even know why he said that, except that I believe I'm blacklisted everywhere I go.
Okay, can you give me an example?
Proof at all.
Yeah, can you give me an example? I realize there's never any proof when you're a TI, a targeted individual, but can you give me an example of another place where you've been to where you felt blacklisted, please?
Well, I used to go try to get gas in this little town, and every time I would go to get gas, It started slowly. First, it just happened once in a while, but then it got to where every time in this town I stopped to get gas, my card wouldn't work. The clerk was not letting it go through. And they would make me go into the store and pay. And so I started getting gas outside of town, like a few miles away. And that worked. Every time I did it outside of town, it worked. When I would go into the grocery store, I would have people push their baskets right up against mine and sort of push me forward. I had two people. One of them was a local female cop. I had two people just glare at me and stare me down with hatred and rage in their eyes, and it just seemed to me that it just came out of nowhere. I had
Did you
no
ever
idea.
get the impression that they were told a story about you, or that they believed, or what do you think?
Oh, I know they were told a story about me because when part of the time when I went into the grocery store, this happened twice. This guy who I sort of recognize, but I'm not quite sure who he is, but I know I've seen him somewhere in my life. He would stand there and talk to a group of people, where they have the self-checkout registers. He would stand there and he'd be talking to everybody, and they'd all turn and look at me. I'm down the road, down the aisle, checking out myself, and everybody all of a sudden turns to stare at me, and as I walk by him, he laughs at me, and everybody's just looking at me like I'm a monster, and I have no idea what it was about.
Okay, other examples of that, other than the store, or other, how many times in the store does that kind of thing happen, please?
Every time I went into the store for the last year I was living there. Every single time, every store.
Was it the same guy? Was it a different guy? What do you think?
Oh, no, it was different guys. And every time I would go to a store, there would be somebody with, the people who were following me all wore baseball caps, and they all had the lights on their cars. So every time I would go into a store, this one store in particular, I would go at 2 in the morning sometimes just to avoid everybody. I went in one time, and this guy in a baseball cap, this kid, he's like 15 years old. I walk in, and the clerk says to this kid, she's here, and he was sleeping on one of on a booth. They had a little eating area. He jumped off the booth and puts the phone to his ear and pretends to be talking on the phone. And I just walked out of the store. I wouldn't even deal with him. Another time in a different store, the same thing happened. I walked in, and the guy immediately got on the phone. Another young kid standing there in his cap gets on the phone.
How young? What's the age? I don't want to dwell on
15,
it.
probably 15, 14.
Okay, please continue.
When I was in my backyard, a kid 2 houses away that was about 12 was shooting at my house with a BB gun while I was out there. And I just, I stood up and looked at him, and he quit doing it for a few minutes, and then he started again.
Huh.
I had to throw things at my house.
Was one of the neighbor kids?
Yeah, he was a neighbor. I don't know him. He lived, like half a block away.
Okay. What else were you going to say? They'd throw things. What was that again you were going to say?
I would sit outside. This caused me to start smoking cigarettes again for a while. And I was sitting outside smoking a cigarette, and something hit my house. It's like somebody was throwing rocks at my house. You're cutting out. You're cutting out completely. I guess I've lost you. I can hear you talking, but it's not clear.
Okay, she's walking around.
Well, I'm sitting still.
Okay, testing 1, 2.
What?
Now, are you there? Because we're losing our connection.
I can hear you now.
Okay, why don't you just repeat what you said in the last minute or so, because it was pretty choppy. Could you please repeat that?
What's the last thing you heard?
I don't know. Why don't you just repeat what you said?
Somebody was throwing things at my house. I sat outside and was smoking. This whole stress thing caused me to start smoking. And people were hitting my house with rocks. And go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You're doing great now. I can hear you fine. Please continue, though.
So then at night, a lot of times I would hear things hit my front porch. I went outside, even in the dead of winter when it's freezing and there was snow and ice on the ground. Every time I went outside, somebody's light would come on across the lake at their house. They spotlighted me with this big, huge spotlight. They flashed it at me. And even if I was going somewhere at 2 in the morning, which I did a lot of the time just to, get out of the house once in a while, I'd go for a drive by myself. At 2 in the morning, I had a posse with me everywhere I went.
How big was the
posse? It varied. In the beginning, it was just 2 cars that would follow me, the same 2 cars everywhere. And then when I started talking about it on the phone to my son and my ex, it increased to 15 to 20 cars at a time. And
now, how many times a week did you go out? Did this happen? From 2 to 15, or
when I was testing it out, it was every day, no matter how many times a day I went out. And that's how I knew that it was actually happening, is because there were 3 entrances into town, and they would be at every entrance. Somebody would be waiting every time I left the house, and then they would start following me. And they were, most of them in the beginning had fire insignia, the fire department insignia on their cars.
So, like you have a volunteer fire department in your town, or what?
Yeah, it was a volunteer fire department, and I also was right next to the Air Force Academy, and right next to, apparently, all the stuff I've been reading about lately, where they've done, psychological testing and, all kinds of things like that. It's just a hot area, I think.
Now,
a lot of really strict Christian people, a lot of Mormons, and a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses. The Jehovah's Witnesses were in my neighborhood, and they were definitely in on it. I recognized some of them in the group. I recognized a person from Denver where I worked. Somebody from Denver from my work was two different cars were part of the stalkers.
So, now how would you know that they were Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons?
Oh, because the Jehovah's Witnesses came to my house to try to recruit me. And
so that would be 1 or 2 people, but I mean, if you're talking about stalking, we'd be talking about quite a number of people. I'm just asking.
Well,
how you might have ascertained the fact that they were Jehovah's?
Because they told me they were, and I talked to them. And
yeah, but you only talked to 2 of them. There must have been. How many do you think were in on the stalking?
I don't know. I have no idea.
I'm just asking.
All I know is that it was my neighbors, and there are a lot of Mormons in that town and a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses. And I know that my neighbor the neighbor next to the guy with the BB gun was one of the Jehovah's Witnesses that hung out with the one who used to come to my house and try to recruit me. And they kept saying, I suspect it's partly about my daughter. I think that I got put on a list. I made somebody mad, and I got put on a list. And I think that somebody just went crazy with that to get revenge.
Okay. Now, why would you be put on a list because of your daughter, if I may ask?
Well, because I care for her. She's disabled, and I care for her. And, I've never even spanked my kids. Not once in my life did I ever spank my kids, because I believe violence breeds violence. And we just don't have that kind of relationship, And
but
I pissed somebody off.
Go ahead.
I pissed somebody off whose husband is an EMT, and in that small area, all the EMTs and the cops and the firefighters know each other. And they're all buddies.
Of course.
It's a good old boy system.
When you talk about a small area, can you give me an approximate population of that town that you're in?
I don't really know what the population is, but it only had two or three fire department buildings. It had two big grocery stores, and about 3 convenience stores, and that was it. The rest of it was residential.
Did you get harassed in all 3 of the convenience stores, or?
I got harassed in every single store. Every store in town that I went into.
Now, was it the employees of these stores, or was it just people that were customers?
It was mostly the employees. And, it's not like I ever knew them or even talked to them in a bad way or anything like that. I just went in and did my shopping, and all of a sudden everybody was really nasty to me. And they kind of looked at me like I was a freak.
Now, when you say all of a sudden, what do you mean by that? Or did they do that from the first visit, or did it happen after 12 visits, or what say they, please?
I would say after I was in that town for 3 years. I would say after about the first year is when I started noticing it. Maybe they did it before and I didn't notice. But then, all of a sudden, during the last year I was there, it was all the time, everywhere I went.
Yes. Okay. Now, how far away did you get from this town? Did you travel? Did it happen at different towns, at varying distances away?
Not in the beginning. In the beginning, it was just there. And then it started, I would drive into the next county to see if they would follow me that far. And at first, they didn't go there. But then, after a few weeks, they started following me to that county. And then I realized it was happening as I was going into Denver, which was about 45 minutes away. And so it ended up being everywhere I went. Before I left that state, I stayed in a hotel for a few weeks, and it was happening there. It was the same people, one of the same cars, when I went to the hotel, was stalking me in a grocery store in Denver.
And how were things in Denver for a new arrivee such as yourself, who just came there from 45 miles away? Go ahead.
Well, I was still terrified. I was still traumatized, and so not that you ever get over being traumatized by something like this, but I was still in a really sort of a fight or flight mode. And so I stayed in the hotel the whole time, and I had to be with my daughter all the time anyway, but I stayed in the hotel, and I would step outside the door and smoke a cigarette and go back in. I would go to the grocery store and take care of business and go back in. I was waiting for my car to be repaired, and which, by the way, was a big nightmare from 2 years into that, from 2 years before I left until right now. My car's been sabotaged at the mechanic.
What? By the mechanics or by somebody else?
I think it was by the mechanics.
And what sorts of things are they have been done to your car, if you could please?
Well, they never fixed it. It had problems. It was misdiagnosed 6 times for the same thing. I took it to three different places in that small town, and every time I took it in, they misdiagnosed it, and 2 of them refused to fix it. And it wasn't like it was a big deal. I was going to pay for it. There was no problem. You take your car in, you pay somebody, they fix it.
Can I ask you what the problem was, please? With the car?
I had several problems. One was a U-joint, which got misdiagnosed and not fixed until the very end. I had a radiator problem, which was misdiagnosed and not fixed. I had a problem with my sway bar, which was misdiagnosed, paid to fix, and not fixed. And that's the problem that kept me in the hotel for 2 weeks. That never got fixed. It was halfway fixed, but, it was just a constant thing.
Can you just tell me what year the vehicle is and what year this happened, please?
The vehicle is a 98, but, it's not... These problems that could have been fixed, I know a lot about cars, and these are problems that actually could have been fixed. They just didn't do it. I had the same problem with a strut. You know, how many times do you replace a strut? 3 times in a period of 3 months? Seems unreasonable to me.
So they were gaming you, these repair agencies. Now, how many different auto repair shops were involved in this, please?
4, 5, counting Pep Boys, 5.
And this is in your small town or in Denver, please?
There was one in a town about 10 miles away. There was 3 in the small town, and 1 in a town about 20 miles away.
Now, I'm going to leave this totally up to you if you feel like, and remember, this recording is going into the public domain, and I can tell you right now, it's right up there in my top 25% of my quality recordings. But I'm telling you, I'm probably not going to pull this out of the public. I'm not going to throw this recording away like I do about half of what I do. That said, do you mind telling us what town you were in that 3 of the auto agencies or auto fix-it places misdiagnosed and what have you, and where you received bad service? And I'm sorry for such a long question.
Well, I don't know. What do you think the repercussions of something like that are?
I don't know. Let me tell you that nobody that I've ever interviewed has said their stalking and harassment has gone down because of it. You know, my own experience is I'm a different kind of a guy because I have a talk show and I speak out about this thing all the time. So I don't know. I don't know what the repercussions would be.
Well, but the truth is, they know where I am. You know, there's no doubt in my mind that they already know where I am.
The perps.
Exactly. And so it was Palmer Lake, Colorado. But
okay,
it
and
included people in Denver and Colorado Springs and Castle Rock. The whole line from Denver all the way down to Colorado Springs.
Okay. All right. I thank you for disclosing that, and I think that's about as deep as we want to get into any disclosure. But it doesn't sound like anything that's purely isolated to that area, because I've heard these types of things, although yours would be one of the more shocking stories. I've heard these types of things in other towns. What other sorts of things have happened to you? Let's have some other examples, please.
My neighbor, the day that I think I told you in the last segment that the cops were buzzing me all day long, I called my neighbor over and I said, I am not saying that you know who's doing this or that you're involved in it, but just in case you are, I would like for you to let people know that my daughter does not deserve to be treated like this. Whatever you people may think I've done, it's nothing to do with her. She's defenseless. She's innocent. And it's just unbelievable to me that you would put her through this. And that night, after a certain period of time, absolutely nothing happened. I went out. Nobody followed me. I went out twice. Nobody followed me at all. When I came home, nobody bothered me. Nobody was bugging me at all. And I was just shocked, you know. And the next day, she came over to talk to me again, and she goes, well, last night must have been a relief. And
this is it. Go ahead.
That absolutely confirmed that she was involved in it. She
sure.
had conversations she had conversations with me mentioning things that my brother and I had talked about on the phone. So in my mind at that time, she had talked to my brother. Now, she may have just had access to my phone calls somehow. You know, maybe I was wrong about how she got the information, but she got private information about me somehow.
Now, when you said that cops were buzzing your house, what do you mean by that, please?
They just drove by it all day long, back and forth. And they I called my son to tell him, I told you about them shining the laser at me. When I called my son to tell him about that, there was a whole crowd of cops across the street in a parking lot, and I actually broke down and started crying on the phone when I was talking to him about it, which is rare for me. And you could hear this audible, oh, like, oh, now she's feeling sorry for herself, that kind of thing.
The cops that were across the street in a crowd were saying this.
Yeah.
How many cops were there?
There were at least 3 cars, and you never see that many cars. There were 3 cars, 3 black and whites, which aren't even the color for that town. They're in the town monument that's connected to it. And there was the SUV, the big white SUV was there. And it's hard to see. It was pretty dark, but there was a whole crowd of people over there. And it was
so it's not
scary.
Like you're a big threat, like you weren't driving a Sherman tank with a bunch of heavy artillery on it. You were just you, right?
Yeah. Yep, one person with a responsibility that, I would not put in jeopardy to fight somebody like that.
Okay, again, though, you used the term the cops were buzzing your house. Can you tell me more about what you mean by that, please?
They just drove by it all day long. Every time I used to sit outside a lot because, like I said, it made me start smoking again. And I didn't do that in the house with my kid. And so I would sit outside and smoke cigarettes. And I was always watching to see what was going on. I was trying to put the pieces together and figure out who was doing this and why they were doing it. And all day long, they would just go back and forth in front of my house. And you would see them, maybe a few times a day. But this was like 20 or 30 times. And it seemed to be concentrating on me. They looked right at me as they were driving by. It was very
now, how many
pointed.
cops are in this town where you live? How many cops or cop cars do you guess there were?
Well, I only ever saw 2 at one time. I think there were only 2 on duty at one time. I'm not sure about that, but that's all I ever saw.
Now, do you live on a main street?
Yeah, I was on a main street.
Okay, so they could have. Okay. But basically, they were looking at you, making it pretty obvious to look at you. These cops, 20 or 30 times a day. 20 or 30 times a day. You're saying the cops in a town of 2 cop cars, the cops would drive by and they'd rubberneck and look at you. Is that? I'm just not pushing. I'm just asking.
That only happened like that one day. The rest of the time, they just went about their business.
Okay, so it was one day, 20 plus times where they drove by and rubbernecked and look at you. Yeah, I've had that happen right here in downtown Vancouver too. Where 5 different cop cars were rubbernecking, gawking at me. 2, maybe 3 times. Just 4, maybe 5 cars just gawking at me. It just gives you the creeps. So I have
you can tell
no.
when it's pointed at you,
Yeah. What other sorts of things have happened to you, please?
Oh, let's see. They broke into my car and pulled the carpet out of its metal, the little metal runner thing that holds it in place. And I hadn't been in the back of that car in I don't know how long. And I know I didn't do it. It's not something a mouse could do. It's not something that could have happened anyway except for somebody pulling that carpet out of there in order to get to something underneath it. I'm assuming that that's what they were doing. I believe that happened even before I moved to this town. The first time that happened like a year before I moved to that town. And I thought it was odd, but I had already been used to people breaking into my house, my other house, and going through my things. So I knew, unlocking my windows, I never left unlocked because I had somebody I was protecting, not to mention protecting myself. I never had windows unlocked, never left them that way. And I would come home and find windows unlocked. I found another door jamb broken at that house, the previous house.
So they were messing with you. They didn't have to break your door jams. They didn't have to leave the windows unlocked. They were messing with you. They wanted you to know they've been there. Is that the way you took it?
At the time, I took it that they were trying to leave access for themselves to get in. They did actually have to take the door jam off to get into the house without a key, and at one place. But leaving the windows open, I took to mean that they were trying to leave easy access so that they could just crawl through the window.
Now, how many houses are we talking about that you've lived at? And were they all houses? Were some of them apartments? Did you?
No, they were all houses. They were all houses.
And
we're talking about 4 different houses that I'm sure people went in and out of.
Okay, now did you rent these houses? Did you buy them, please?
No, they were all rented. And I had, for most of it, I was married. You know, the last house and the one before that, I lived in most of the time by myself. Well, not by myself, with my daughter. And so, you know,
okay.
my ex was always there, and part of the time my son was in these other houses too.
Okay.
And I think they go after people who are by themselves and who don't have many connections.
Okay. What other issues do you want to talk about? We're rounding off to closing the interview down, but I want to give you plenty of opportunity to bring up any other issues that you have to say, please.
Well, you know, I think that one of the things I think is really important is that the people who do this are lacking in self-esteem. I think that they are angry. I think that, like you say, they're killers, that they've probably caused many people to die by ruining their lives, by breaking their hearts, by physical assaults, by taking everything they value from them. I doubt that many of the perpetrators would be able to survive a lot of these things, as well as a lot of us have. And I think that they purposely are making things worse in this world. I don't think anything they're doing is cleaning up the riffraff. I don't think it's helping in any sense of that word at all.
Oh, what about these volunteer fire department guys? Do you think, you know, did they know about all this, the far-reaching effects of what you just described? Do you think they knew? Do you
I don't think
how
a rational person could not know that I think the agenda is to push somebody to their death. I believe that that's the agenda for whatever reason, and I don't know who put them up to it, but I really do believe that that's the purpose of it.
Now, how many other people? Go ahead.
Because, you know, I mean, I'm a pretty strong person. I've spent a lot of time by myself before all this stuff started happening, and that's why I think I was able to survive it better. But I think it did make me act out some, you know, and if I hadn't been strong, I think that it could have pushed me over the edge, and I think it pushes a lot of people over the edge. But how could you not know that that's what's happening? You see it happening. You have access to somebody 24/7 through surveillance, so how could you not know that?
So these, you think it's volunteer fire departments, and you think there's no way they couldn't know that this is happening? These volunteer firemen. I
think it's a lot of civil servants. I think it's police. I think it's fire. I think it's Joe, normal citizen. You know, I think it's people who think they're helping the world, who don't really have the whole story. But I don't see how any rational person could not know how painful it is to put somebody through that. It's beyond me that somebody would not understand how that works. Because we're wired. We're hardwired, according to some tests that have been done, to when we're rejected or hurt, there's a certain part of our brain that lights up, and every one of us get angry. We're hardwired to do that. The people who are healthier are able to recover from it more quickly. But the ones that have lower self-esteem or maybe don't have as much support in their lives or have been abused don't recover the same way most of the time.
Okay. What do you want to say to those civil servants, to those to those cops, those firefighters, those people who most people wouldn't know about this about them? Most people wouldn't know what you're talking about, that they're doing that. What do you have to say to everybody involved? What do you want to say? Now's your time, because this interview is going in the public domain for the eternity of mankind. What do you want to say to them? I
want to say that it could be your kid that's suffering from this. It could be your best friend or your loved one that gets it the next time just because they piss somebody off and somebody puts them on a list. And there might not be anything you can do to stop it, and it might go further than it's gone with some of us. They might die because of it.
Do you think those people know about that there is a list? Do you think they just blindly do what they're told to do? What's your guess?
I think some of them do know there's a list. I know that health care professionals do because they have threat assessment teams. And I suspect the local police know because they have threat assessment teams also. And the fire and the police departments in almost every town I've been in are brothers. You know what I mean? They're close. And they work
brothers as in Masons, you mean, or brothers as in
brothers
what?
Brothers as in there's a brotherhood where they take care of each other. It's like a professional courtesy kind of thing.
Okay.
And I do think some of them know, if not all of them.
Okay. What else? What else do you want to say? It's totally open-ended, and I just want you to get your thoughts out for the eternity of mankind. What do you want to tell people? What do you want people to know about this protocol of organized stalking?
Well, like I said, it's not going to be just limited to the people it's limited to now. This is going to go beyond just going after a few people who you don't want to see in your town. It's going to go to where we're all under control and none of us have any freedom at all. And we're giving people power to do exactly what they want to do to us. And there's a certain percentage of those people that are sadistic, nasty people who are going to take advantage of that power and do things that are unspeakable, just like Hitler did. And if you don't do something about it now, you're going to be sorry that you let it go on.
Okay. God, I cannot thank you enough for coming on here and talking. This is one of the best interviews I've ever done, but I want to give you, as I always do at the end of every interview, I want to give you one more chance. Is there anything else you want to say before we come to a close here?
Peace.
Say what?
That's it. Peace.
Peace. All right. And that is the end of this recording.
Thank you.